We're now recording. This is Dr. Lee Jones on the line with you. We'll call this class March 31st. And our goal today is to talk about feminism. We'll talk about feminism. The other recording that we've done earlier, we talked about the first set of these slides where feminism would be conceived as a form of oppression, that feminism, that patriarchy is a form of oppression, and that feminism is a theoretical solution to that oppression. That we looked at feminism to show, we looked at the proof of patriarchy. So we did some statistics, we did some numbers, and we showed that feminism is one very good response to the nature of the sexual hierarchy in the United States, right? So the opportunity here is to think about things a little bit differently than you might normally think about them, to reinvent the wheel, if you will. The question I want you to think about as we walk through this material, as you think about it, I want to know, do you conceive of gender as a hierarchical binary, right? A binary meaning a world that's only conceived of as men and women, and then hierarchical meaning that men are on top, men are in the more favored, the more empowered position. Well, you don't have to, because conceiving of gender as a hierarchical binary means you exclude the LGBT community. And this hierarchical binary gives privileges for traditional men and women, but social exclusion for non-binary folks. A discussion of feminism gives us the opportunity to think about things differently. Do you think about those who, for reasons of identity, that have been marginalized, isolated, pushed to the side by society? Well, of course you should. Even the unorganized and the demobilized, they suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I want you to think about this. Are you a feminist? Who are you? Do your actions serve the patriarchy? Who are you? And who are you? Like, who should you be? That is the opportunity that feminism presents to you. Remember with me your Shakespeare. This from Hamlet, scene 3, act 1. Remember, Shakespeare and Hamlet said, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or, and this is our point, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. And by opposing, end them. How will, if the society has a problem, how will you manage that problem? What will you do to it? You have to change your theoretical position. You have to think about how you have to change how you think about things. So that was my introductory sentence. So towards that end, let's think about 4 types of feminism that are brought to you by your textbook. We're in that chapter. I forget the number of the chapter, but the chapter says feminism and environmentalism, and we're only going to talk about the feminism part. So here's liberal feminism. The roots of liberal feminism, you see here, it can be traced back to the 1792 writings of Mary Wollstonecraft. Let's look at her picture while we talk about her. Mary Wollstonecraft, right? Well, we in this class, we are well familiar with the racialized nature of this country in the 1700s, in the 1790s in specific. Remember that the US Constitution is ratified in 1789, and the only people allowed in the Constitutional Convention of 1787 in that hot summer in Philadelphia were wealthy white males. So the Constitution is ratified in 1789. Wollstonecraft presents her book in 1792. Well, we're familiar that by that time, a full fifth, 20% of the United States are enslaved Africans. All right. So we are familiar, well familiar with the racism of the times, but let's familiarize ourselves with the sexism of those times as well. Remember with me, and here comes his picture. Remember with me Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. Thomas Jefferson, one of the more famous, more revered, most well-quoted founders of the United States, and Thomas Jefferson, the person, the enslaver who personally got the enslaved teenager pregnant multiple times, Sally Hemings. Thomas Jefferson once said that were our state a pure democracy, there would still be excluded from our deliberations women who, to prevent deprivation of morals or ambiguity of issues, should not mix promiscuously in the gatherings of men. Let's pause on that point. Let me open up a new document here. I want you to see those words right quick. Let me copy and paste that quote in here. Give me just a second. All right. Look at what Thomas Jefferson said. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Okay, that's too big. Thomas Jefferson here is saying, were our state a pure democracy, there would still be excluded from our deliberations women. He says, I don't care, even if we did have a pure democracy, we would still keep women out. Jefferson, why would you keep women out? To prevent deprivation of morals. Whose morals? Ambiguity of issues. Whose ambiguity are you concerned about? He says that women should not mix promiscuously in gatherings, promiscuously or freely in gatherings of men. Is that right? Let's go with another thought from these times. Another thought from these times is uttered by this person here. His name is Edmund Burke. You'll know something about Edmund Burke. He was the conservative member of parliament. He wrote strongly against, the French Revolution. Edmund Burke is seen as the father of conservatism, the conservatism that holds sway in this country. Let me show you what Edmund Burke said. I'm giving you proof of the need for feminism as early as the 1790s, right? So in 1790, Edmund Burke here says, let me make it nice and big for you. Edmund Burke here says, on this scheme of things, a king is but a man, a queen is but a woman is but an animal, and an animal not of the highest order. Edmund Burke, women that are not of royalty, non-aristocratic women, what are they? He calls them an animal, and not even high order animals. I imagine a monkey is a high order animal, but a low order animal, what's that, like a mouse or a rat? Edmund Burke says on the scheme of this barbarous philosophy, which is the offspring of cold hearts and muddy understandings. He calls the understanding muddy. He says it is void of solid wisdom. So he is criticizing the thought, but he is telling us a thought that is dominant in his times, that women are but animals. Okay, so now let's return to Mary Wollstonecraft on the slide. You'll remember where liberalism holds that people have natural rights to life, liberty, and property, there's a natural reason that results from these rights, and that the government must therefore be limited. Mary Wollstonecraft says that there's a flaw in liberalism. She says that none of these natural rights, none of this natural reason, none of this limited government is applicable to women. So Wollstonecraft here says that women are denied the rights to even have custody over their children. Women could not own property. She acknowledges that women could not hold elected office. Women could not divorce their husbands. And so for Mary Wollstonecraft, she says that this is proof of the need for some type of liberal understanding of women's rights. Now, one of the things that Wollstonecraft identifies is relationships. Wollstonecraft here says that when men and women get into relationships, women often have to tamp down their own power, have to shave off their own strength. That women often in a relationship have to feign weakness in order to build strength in the men in their lives, right? That Okay, so this is a point where I really wish we were in class, because I often do have good examples, even if it would be 8 o'clock in the morning and y'all come to class half asleep, I would still be able to provoke a couple of you to admit that you are in some type of oppressive relationship, not in like a serious, call the cops way, but in a way where, certain, young women feel that they have to act more ignorant so that the men in their lives have more strength, right? So let's go to this slide. Look at this. Mary Wollstonecraft says the norm of oppression that is present in relationships, male-female relationships, she says this creates a form of vice. She says that oppressed women develop behavioral habits that include feigned weakness and supposed helplessness and fake superficiality, and that these behaviors, when women adopt them, are dishonest and demeaning. She says that in these relationships, men become oppressive, they become arrogant, they become self-absorbed like spoiled children, and they feel like they deserve the higher role in society, even if their individual merits absolutely do not merit a higher position in society. So, for Wollstonecraft, the effort is to get women to develop a sense of responsibility for their own lives, and then this would allow men to stop condescending to women. And when that happens, both men and women would enjoy a stronger position in society. Let's go 100, 200 years forward. Let's leave Wollstonecraft and let me introduce you perhaps to bell hooks. Bell Hooks might be seen as one of the foremost feminist thinkers of the day. And I'm talking about today, like 2020, right? Bell Hooks, she says something that I want you folks to keep in mind, right? Let's quote Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks once said, "We live in a world of crisis, a world governed by politics of domination, one in which the belief in a notion of superior and inferior and its concomitant ideology that the superior should rule over the inferior, one where this affects the lives of all people everywhere." Bell Hooks then acknowledges that society has, especially in the United States, has a fundamental problem. Well, Bell Hooks, what is the problem? She says the United States is not just a male-centered society. Bell Hooks says this is a white supremacist, a capitalist, and a patriarchal society, that the society is white supremacist, capitalist, and patriarchal. Really? Why? Like, why is this the case? And or more specific, Ms. Bell Hooks, why did you decide to use those three words in tandem with each other? Read this with me. Bell Hooks says, I don't have the year on here, but Bell Hooks says, "I began to use the phrase in my work, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, because I wanted to have some language that would actually remind us continually of the interlocking systems of domination that define our reality, and not just to have one thing be like, gender is the important issue, race is the important issue." But for me, the use of that particular jargonistic phrase was a way, sort of a shortcut of saying that all these things are functioning simultaneously at all times in our lives, right? So you'll remember that there's a researcher out here now, I cannot call her name, that she has written a few books that have brought a new phrase to our way of understanding. Kimberly Crenshaw, I had to Google it. Kimberly Crenshaw, right? So where intersectionality means that you're going to acknowledge the intersection or the crossroads between race, class, and gender. And this is what Bell Hooks said earlier, where she said this is a white supremacist, that's a racial analysis, a capitalist, that's a class analysis, and a patriarchal, that's a gender analysis, right? So the United States is white supremacist, capitalist, and patriarchal at the same time. That then is to say that you have intersecting problems all impacting the same person at the same time, and thus any solution that you come up with, can you solve the problems of class oppression and leave off the gender oppression, particularly of someone that feels all three? You will not be able to. So Bell Hooks tells us this. All right, let's go back to liberal feminism and Wollstonecraft, right? Now, did I miss your message? Hey, Wilson, did you say pause for a second? Is there something I should go back over? Feel free to throw it in the chat box there, right? Or
it's cool. I was gonna say something, but I'm gonna hold my tongue. I'm gonna hold my tongue.
Say something. I would like to hear it. I miss you guys.
It's too early in the morning. It's too early in the morning.
Feel free to be controversial.
I don't feel like it.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'll email you my opinion on what you said earlier with the Edmund Burke theory.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, can we hear about it though? I mean, like, so there'll be like a discussion within the class.
My pleasure. I believe Wilson is getting ready. Here, I'm going to provoke you to say something. I believe Wilson is getting ready to tell us that she agrees with Edmund Burke that women are animals of low order and therefore should not have.
Nothing. I don't want to say nothing too crazy. I'll just email you.
All right.
I'll have
hey,
time.
I have something to say.
Do I hear was that Smith's voice? Do I know your voice?
Miss Bishop.
Yes, that was Miss Bishop. Well, the male voice. Miss Bishop, you have a comment?
Does animal have to be negative? Like women being animals, like does it have to be taken negative?
Right, because yeah.
Yes.
Because tigers and lions are majestic animals, right?
Yeah.
In that context.
I just wanted to contradict a little bit. That was all.
Well, I'm sure that he meant it negative, where he says a woman is but an animal, is nothing but, only, right? Yes, so he's kind of comparing the two. So yeah, he probably means that negative. Now, let me, I don't want us to necessarily believe that Edmund Burke believes that women are animals and not of high order, right? Because you see where he says that this philosophy is barbarous, he says it's the offspring of cold hearts, that it produces a muddy understanding and it's void of solid wisdom. So he's talking about a thought that is present in society, but one that he is criticizing personally. But the thought is in society that women are on the lower order of the gender or the sexual hierarchy. All right. I was glad. Usually these two quotes all get a good, strong response. So I'm glad that they did. All right. So for Wollstonecraft, right? The first thing I want us to think about for Wollstonecraft is that the relationships that people get into, right? That the male-female relationships. Now, remember, she's talking in the 1790s, right? But maybe some of this is true in the 21st century, that the relationships that people get in, that men and women get into, create oppression because women act like they are weaker than they actually are in order to build up strength in men. Okay, now let's see what else she says, right? Wollstonecraft here says that love in relationships, right? Love creates societal problems because women are oppressed by the very same men that they fall in love with. And so love and romance then get in the way of a woman demanding respect and equality from the men in their lives. Think about it this way. You and your, let's say you are in a male-female, a gender binary relationship. You and, let's talk about Miss Wilson, right? Let's say Miss Wilson has a boyfriend.
I'm not that type of female. Stop. I wouldn't even allow that.
All right, so let's say, okay, random young woman is in a relationship with random young man, right? And I come up to both of you and I say, hey, could you tell me where the Walmart is? Can you give me directions to the local Walmart? And let's say the woman knows the answer, but she says, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let my boyfriend answer that question. And let's say, I don't know, maybe he knows the answer, maybe he doesn't, but let's say that he takes the lead and answers the question, right? So the woman being quiet, is she doing so because she really doesn't know? No, she absolutely knows the answer. Then why did she answer it? Because she says, well, wait a minute, I'm gonna let my boyfriend answer the question. How you like that as an example? And so if this happens, right, on a individual basis, not individual, if this happens over and over and over again, look at that third bullet point, then romantic love for Wollstonecraft, this becomes a threat because it compels women to submit to the domination of men. So the young woman in our example, not Miss Wilson, but the young woman in our example, she's not answering questions on directions. Well, then maybe she's not speaking up on other issues, and maybe she's taking a backseat on other things. And then all of a sudden, the husband, the boyfriend gets home. I don't know. Let's say they're married now. Then the husband comes home, and the wife comes home, and both of them work, the same hours a day. Let's say they both get home at 7:00 p.m. Get home at 7, and then the husband goes to the couch, grabs a drink, sits down and puts on the TV, and then the woman comes home, changes her clothes, and then she gets in the kitchen and start cooking, right? Is that a form of gender domination where a woman submits herself to the man because she allows herself to be the one to cook? All right. That would be it. This would work better if I could see your faces and then I could provoke you, but let me move on. So for
share the slides.
Share the slides.
Your screen again?
Uh-oh. Can you not see the screen?
No.
Uh-oh. Really? Uh-oh. I don't know what to do about that. It shows me that I'm sharing the screen. Uh-oh. Can no one see the screen?
I can still see the screen.
Oh.
I can see the screen.
I'm gonna exit and then come back.
I can see it.
All right, thank you. It scared me. I'm showing you guys pictures and I'm bringing in. I even showed you Edmund Burke this morning. It's like,
no, I saw it earlier, but just now after
something's blinking out. I'm sorry. Keep trying, like reload it or something. Okay, so let's end the liberal feminism part, right? The liberal feminist here then says it's only when women have equality with men that the emancipated woman can become the best and free-thinking person in a relationship as possible. That's why she's emphasizing the best wife and mother that's possible, right? So Mary Wollstonecraft wants women to be able to join in society on an equal footing, right? Wollstonecraft does not want to radically destroy society. Wollstonecraft says that she wants women to be able to join with the men in their lives inside the society. She doesn't want to change it. She wants to she wants to open it up so that women can be included, right? That's the liberal feminist, right? The liberal feminist wants to join. She wants to have rights in the society. Okay.
So,
I'm
wait,
25.
can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So she's saying that women are only allowed to be free thinking, or women are only strong enough and equal to men when they are not in relationships with men.
She
Is
is,
that what she's saying?
yeah, she is criticizing relationships. Part of
She's
that book, she
contradicting
says,
herself.
yeah,
Literally.
she she says, part of that book, she says that if a woman cannot be her true self in a relationship, then that woman needs to be out of the relationship. She needs to divorce that husband. She needs not to get married in the first place, right? And
See,
then
this is where the misogynists come in and attack feminism because of women who have the ideals like this. This is not. I'm sorry. Let me shut up.
okay, yeah, all right, all right. You know, that could be true, right? That could be true. Because she ultimately says, right, if an individual woman cannot free herself, then she shouldn't be married. Well, if women across society cannot free themselves, then women across society should not get married. So one of the things Wollstonecraft can be interpreted to say is that marriage itself is an oppressive institution, that relationships are oppressive because men are oppressive in those relationships.
Can I speak on this?
Yes.
Real quick. All right. So, I mean, what I got from it when you were explaining it was more like, because a relationship is more so of a unity and is based around love, it wouldn't make sense for a woman to feel oppressed within a marriage. So, so what I was getting from that is, why are you in a marriage if you feel oppressed by your partner? And you should,
Yeah,
that's
I
why
agree with that. Yeah, like, because if you not staying true to yourself, how you finna stay true to your husband?
That statement is kind of vague because not everyone who is oppressed knows that they are oppressed, even throughout love and relationships. Also, with the thinker like Wollstonecraft in the society that she stood upon when she came up with like this whole ideology, I guess, or whatever, like her book or whatever, it was known and it was a normal for like women to have to marry. That was the only way that they gained like social status, had value to society, etc. So yeah.
But I think she's like blatantly speaking up against that ideology of having to be in a relationship. Whereas she was saying that if you feel like, she was highlighting what it would mean to be oppressed in a relationship, such as undermining your own strength in order to appease your husband, as well as suggesting that if you do find yourself in this predicament, that you should leave marriage, which would speak up against the ideology that you should have to be in a marriage to gain value.
Yeah, that's the point. She was a revolutionary. Honestly, with Wollstonecraft, honestly, I know for a fact that like she was like known throughout like history to be like against these normals like around that time, because she was. Let me shut up. I don't know. I can't fully say if she was like a lesbian, but it was known that she had relationships with other women. But it's so that's the point that I'm making, is like she's against marriage, but like during the time that the time that she lived in, marriage was something of a normal. Like women got married, they had kids, they were homemakers, like that was like normal everyday life. So like, yeah, she's going against the concept of marriage, but then also she's saying like, that's why I said she was contradicting herself. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Yeah, so, two things I want you to keep from the Wollstonecraft point, right? One is that the liberal feminist believes that women should be able to join society as it is and be an equal partner in things. But then one of the things that keeps people out of, keeps women away from being equal in society are the relationships that they enter in, right? That marriages are not necessarily predicated on love, but marriages are social and economic contracts, one where women are abused in those contracts. We're at the half-hour mark. Can I keep going, please? Let me give you
Please.
one.
Yeah.
Right now, remember, we've got 4 forms of feminism, but here comes the socialist feminist. Right? Let me hit the button. Let's get Wollstonecraft off the screen. We're done with her. Now, here's the socialist feminist. I'm going to open up a Word document. I'm going to show you something in a second. Okay, the socialist feminist, she believes that the mainstream of society in the United States should be radically changed. Now, remember, the liberal feminist does not want to radically change society. She wants to be included in that society. The socialist feminist says the mainstream society is fundamentally problematic, and therefore it should be radically changed itself, right? The goal then is not to bring women into the capitalist mainstream on an equal basis with men. Instead, the goal is to organize women to adopt a socialist critique of gender-based capitalism and change it and to radically destroy it, right? The socialist feminists, they believe capitalism and patriarchy are mutually reinforcing. Let's refer back to Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks says that this country is a white supremacist, capitalist, and patriarchal society. So the socialist feminist believes that capitalism and patriarchy are mutually reinforcing. Let's go back to the slide. Right, mutually reinforcing. So, for example, an example of which, right, let's say a woman doesn't have equal access to economic resources, getting paid less than men. Women, those stats I showed you earlier, the poverty and illiteracy, these are fundamentally issues that affect women harder around the world than they do men. Okay. So lower wages, lower levels of property ownership. So the lack of equal access to economic resources, this promotes a woman's dependence on men. And that dependence then becomes patriarchy. In turn, the social expectation is that women will be taken care of by the men in their lives, so the husbands will be able to make higher wages, and this justifies keeping the wages of women low. This provides capitalism with a steady supply of cheap labor, and the socialist feminist then says that this capitalism that keeps women with lower wages than men, and then the patriarchy that promotes women's dependence on men, these things are mutually reinforcing. The socialist feminist says you need to strike the match and burn it all. You need to reject all of this stuff. So to the slides. The socialist feminist rejects the liberal feminist thought of incremental change to bring women into the capitalist mainstream on an equal footing. They don't agree with that. The socialist feminist then says the United States needs to be radically changed. So the poverty of women produces dependency on men who will exploit their superiority to subjugate the women in their lives. The society then expects that women need to be taken care of by their men. And so the social norm becomes that men will be paid higher wages and women don't need higher wages because they're going to be taken care of by the men in their lives. All right. So women then suffer with lower wages and make up the majority of those employed in low wage jobs. So capitalism makes women a supply of cheap labor. I wonder if you find that in your, everyday life. Part of the question would be, when you go to fast food restaurant, are you served by women or men? Okay. When
Both.
you go, yes. Do I hear somebody want to interject?
You said what gender are we served by restaurants? I said both.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I know that there might be some men in the store, but I know when I go to like Zaxby's and get the chicken salad. You go to other small restaurants, right? What do you call it? Jason's Deli, to get yourself a veggie wrap, trying to eat right? There might be men in the store, but the cashier is a woman. The person preparing the food, that's a woman. The person bringing the food out to you in Jason's Deli, yeah, that's going to be a young lady, right? And so is it true then that women are in low wage positions more than men are. All right, the socialist feminists, right? One more slide. Okay, so the socialist feminist then combines the fact that women in a capitalist system are a supply of cheap labor and are thus exploited by the men in their lives, combines that with women suffering from.
Wait a second. What was the which feminism was it you were talking about with we just said
Yes.
that because women are working like the register at restaurants, like what was that again?
We'll call that the socialist feminist.
Is I mean, like I thought that was because they just didn't want to put women in like, well, women didn't want to be the ones cooking the food, like in fast food. That's typically how it would go.
That might be the case. That might be the case. We're the critique we're pushing here is that there'll be, let's say McDonald's is the classic fast food restaurant, that there's going to be more women employed in the McDonald's than there are men, because women will have more low-paying jobs in a capitalist society than men will.
Okay.
Right? And so, right, so look at this last line here. The critique is that capitalism makes women a steady supply. Okay, now, combine this thought with the concept of the double day. I just alluded to it a second ago. The double day, the notion here from the socialist feminists is that women have to work for low wages outside the home, at their office, right? Daycare, home health, fast food places. And then the woman has to come home and then work for zero wages as the mother of the household, cleaning the children, as the wife of the household, cooking for the household. The concept of the double day then is that women have to work and be exploited outside the home and then come inside the home working